Groves here from Governance Studio, and today we're looking at fiercely practical steps to writing great board minutes. So as usual, this is one of a series of 12 sessions. This is number 9 in the session. So hopefully you've had a chance to join us on the previous sessions. And I'm kind of walking you through a set of minutes, how I would prepare them, the kinds of things that are really important to include. And so the best way for me to do some of this is to just show you some of the documents that I'm using and what they look like, kind of the level of detail they have. And so I'm here in my DiliTrust board portal, a really great place for me to be able to share information. And today we're going to be looking at the project approval in the May minutes. So those May minutes actually show up at the August meeting for approval. But first off, I'm going to go into the May minutes, and I'm just going to show you the kind of cover memo that would be best practices. You can see here we've got a project approval for the online store, and there's a sample memo in here that might be what a company would use. And I'm just going to review it real quick for you because this is really a best practices kind of memo of the kind of information ideally your management team is providing to the board when they're asking for an approval. So you can see here, it's just a memo to the board. It's got a really quick project description about, when is it going to be completed, what is it, and how much is it going to cost. There's a little note about how it fits into strategy, really important. How does this project fit into our strategy that we've adopted? Let's talk about some of the risks of going ahead and doing this project. Let's talk about any alternatives that got considered. And then we're asking the board, the project is ready to receive, so we're looking for approval. So what board input is being asked for? And then there's some other items that might be added. So there's going to be a detailed review of the project and costs, and there's going to be maybe a copy of the actual resolution. If this was real and going forward, that would be included for the board. But that gives you a sense of the kind of information. It's also a really good clue for you in the minutes as to the kinds of things that are so important that they go on the cover memo and that you might want to consider including in the minutes, of course, assuming that they come up and are discussed in the meeting, because you really have to talk about what actually happened in the meeting. So hopefully that gives you some ideas about best practices there as well, some extra little bonus items. So I'm going to go back in here to my meetings, and now I'm going to go ahead and find in 2022 that May meeting. I'm going to go in there and look at the, whoops, that was not what I meant to do. I meant to go and look at the August meeting, because we want to look at the May minutes. I know it's a bit confusing. It even confuses me from time to time. Okay, here we go. Now we've got the May meeting coming up, and I'm just going to scroll down here a bit. We've gone through all of these top portions all the way up through the annual financial statements and update, and we're now close to this project approval piece. So if you've been with us through the whole series, you know that one of the things that I talk about is keeping the minutes at a high level. You don't want too much detail, but you're trying to demonstrate that the board is doing its job, that they're, getting some information about something, they're getting a presentation from management, they're having some discussions with management, and then they're going ahead and doing the approval. But I like to make sure there's a little flavor included in there. So some of the key topics that got discussed, all of that good stuff. But again, this is a big project, but you'll notice it's only maybe a half page in the minutes. This might be something that they spent a fair amount of time on, but I'm trying to bring all of that up to a high level. I do note one other thing here. You'll see that Mr. Brown and Mr. Klein, if we look up here, we can see that that was a couple of the members of management left the meeting because they weren't needed. As Mr. Jason Jones had a conflict of interest on the project approval for the online store, he also left the meeting. So in this case, there's some information further back in the minutes that he had a conflict because his daughter was with the company that was, doing part of this project or potentially doing part of this project. Okay, so now I just want to talk a little bit about this idea of this project approval. So the CEO reviewed the project approval request for the new online store, referring to materials provided to the board in their meeting packages. So if there's some really important materials, you can include that reference. Those materials are always there to support the board in its decisions, but on things like a project approval, you might want to make a specific statement saying that there were materials provided. She gave an overview. Again, most of this stuff is right out of that very high level cover memo. Now, not all organizations are going to have great cover memos already set up, so you might have to be doing a little bit more reading to find out some key parameters, but everybody always wants to know, when is it going to be done, how much is it going to be how much is it going to cost, and how is it going to fit into our strategy. So you'll see here the project supports the company's new online sales strategy. The key risk, what was the risk? And let's make sure that gets included in here. The recommended service provider. And then you'll see here there's some discussion by the board. They're asking about mitigation plans for the accounting integration, different things, and the CEO reviewed the alternatives that were being explored. So again, I'm not going into detail about this director asked this question and this member of management answered this way. Let's move it up to a much higher level and talk about, there was basically a discussion of this topic, and there was some response about, this aspect. So trying to keep it a really high level. Then again, we noticed there was more discussion and there was a motion, and the online store project was approved with the service provider. And then again, because Mr. Jones, even though he's not in the room, but we note in here too, Mr. Jones had abstained from voting as he had a conflict of interest with regard to the service provider. So again, very important things you're just making sure are being tracked in the minutes. But this again might have been, it might have been 4 or 5 pages of notes in my initial note taking. So a really important part of my process is going back through and going, well, what was the really important stuff that got talked about? What are the things I should be thinking about and making sure that appear in the minutes? And so it's a bit of editing down my notes as opposed to just transcribing them into paragraphs. I really only want to pick out the really important stuff. So hopefully that helps you, gives you some idea of the kind of topics and issues you want to have a short sentence or maybe a short paragraph on when you've got a big project approval that is coming forward to your board. So, wow, we're getting close to the end of the series. Next session is in-camera sessions, which I'll explain that if those aren't familiar to you. We'll talk about it then. And I hope to see you there. So thanks everybody for joining, and happy minutes.